The fluorescent glow of the emergency room entrance felt harsh against Tasha Monroe's skin as she approached in full EMT gear, stretcher folded at her side, and radio crackling updates in her ear. Behind her, the sirens of Medic Unit 42 faded into a tense silence as she stepped up to the automatic doors, only to have them remain stubbornly shut. She tapped her badge on the access panel. No beep. She pressed the unlock button on her radio. No response. "Dispatch, this is Monroe," she said, voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I need the ER doors open. Static." Then the terse reply, "Hold position." "I'm checking." Tasha glanced down the hallway. No nurses, no aides, not even a security guard in sight. Beyond the glass, she could hear the muffled beeping of monitors and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Inside waited patients whose lives depended on every second. She pressed her palm again to the sensor, willing it to recognize her credentials. EMTP, Medic Unit 42, 10 years of life-saving. Still nothing. Her radio crackled again. "Monroe, orders from above, no entry without direct physician approval." Her blood ran cold. "I have a critical patient in the back," she pressed. "I have to get this stretcher through." Moments later, a security buzzer sounded on the inside. A red-coated attendant slid into view through the small pass-through window. Her eyes flicked over Tasha's uniform and lingered on her dark skin before she pressed a button to lock the doors more firmly. "Not allowed," the attendant said, voice flat. "Wait until the doctor comes." Tasha's jaw clenched. She unstrapped the oxygen tank from the stretcher's side and began rolling toward the hallway exit, determined to take her patient, an unconscious cardiac arrest victim, down another corridor into the pediatric wing. But before she could turn, her radio erupted. "Code blue at governor's residence. Daughter, age 6, allergic shock, airway closing." She froze. The governor's daughter, a VIP, yes, but still a child whose life hung by a thread. The ER door loomed mere feet away, mocking her. In a heartbeat, Tasha pivoted, racing back to the ambulance bay. She barked into the crackling radio, "Dispatch, get me a security override. Governor's orders." As she sprinted down the corridor toward the back entrance, she realized the same prejudice that barred her from the ER might seal a child's fate. But Tasha Monroe had never let fear or bias stop her. With determination hardened like steel, she burst through the ambulance doors, the wail of the engine drowning out her frustration. Lives depended on her swiftness now. No locked door, no whispered bias would stand between her and the child she was racing to save. Tasha Monroe tore down the gurney-packed corridor with relentless urgency, her boots echoing on the polished linoleum. Every second counted as she relayed updates to Medic Unit 42. 6-year-old female, anaphylaxis, airway compromise. Prepare epinephrine, IV fluids, intubation kit. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Security override granted." ER doors unlocked. ETA, 2 minutes. But Tasha didn't wait. She pivoted her stretcher toward the ambulance bay, swung the double doors open, and ordered her partner, Cruz, to mount the rear. With a roar of the diesel engine, they blasted out of the hospital compound, blue lights slicing through the gathering dusk. As they careened toward the governor's mansion, Tasha prepped the medications, drawing up 2 milligrams of epinephrine, priming the tubing, and mobilizing her hands for the rapid sequence of life: airway, breathing, circulation. Every highway light became a hurdle, every honk a warning, yet she navigated with surgical precision, eyes fixed ahead. Minutes later, they screeched into the ornate driveway of the mansion. Uniformed guards scrambled aside as the ambulance doors swung open. Inside the foyer, panicked staff flanked a small girl with swollen lips and eyes half closed. The family physician's gloved hands shook as he backed away. Tasha knelt beside the child, her voice calm but commanding. "I'm EMT Monroe. I'm here to help." She assessed the rapid wheeze in the girl's chest, found the IV line Cruz had secured, and injected the epinephrine. Within heartbeats, Tasha pressed the laryngoscope blade between the girl's teeth and slid in the endotracheal tube, securing it with practiced fingers as the room held its breath. Cruz monitored vital signs: pulse climbing, SpO2 rising from 65 to 92% and relayed, "Vitals stabilizing. We've got her." Tasha's gloved thumb traced the girl's carotid pulse, steady and strong. A collective exhale rippled through the room. The governor, white-knuckled and tear-streaked, gripped Tasha's shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, voice hoarse. Moments later, as the ambulance rolled back toward the ER, Tasha radioed ahead. "Prepare pediatric ICU. Governor's daughter en route, post-anaphylaxis, intubated, stable." Cruz administered a bolus of IV fluids, and Tasha placed a reassuring hand on the child's forehead, murmuring, "You're safe now." Through the open ER doors, no longer barred to her, she wheeled the stretcher into the streamlined chaos of the trauma bay, where nurses and doctors snapped into action. As they transferred care to the pediatric team, Tasha stepped back, drenched in sweat, adrenaline still thrumming through her veins. In that moment, she knew she had done more than save a child's life. She had shattered the bias that once denied her entry. And as the governor's daughter lay breathing steadily under the fluorescent lights she'd once been barred from, Tasha Monroe's resolve burned brighter than any locked door ever could. The next morning, Tasha Monroe found herself under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights once more, this time in the hospital's administrative wing. She'd expected gratitude after saving the governor's daughter. Instead, she faced a solemn gathering of senior staff. The ER director, 2 department heads, and a human resources representative. "EMT Monroe," the ER director began, voice clipped. "We need to discuss yesterday's breach of protocol." His tone carried the same cold formality that had barred her at the door. Tasha squared her shoulders. "Protocol," she said calmly, "was literally a matter of life and death." The department head of security cleared his throat. "You ignored chain of command and accessed restricted areas without authorization." He slid a printed memo across the table. Her radio dispatch, security logs, official badge swipe records. That kind of insubordination cannot be overlooked. Tasha met his gaze steadily. "I was locked out of my station, denied entry to the ER, and told to wait while a child's airway closed. In an emergency, protocol bends to necessity. Every second your policies cost me could have killed her." A murmur rippled through the assembled administrators. The ER director's lips thinned. "Your actions expose the hospital to liability. We have rules for a reason." "And lives to protect," Tasha shot back. She gestured to the governor's chief of staff standing in the back, an imposing figure in a tailored suit. He nodded imperceptibly. "The highest office in this state demands a full commendation, not a reprimand." The human resources representative tapped her pen against the dossier. "We understand your point, Ms. Monroe, but this is about maintaining order. You should have raised your concerns through proper channels." "Proper channels," Tasha interrupted sharply. "Close the door on me." Silence fell. She drove the point home. If our own system refuses to let an EMT do her job because of who she is, we're failing every patient who needs us most. The ER director exchanged a glance with the city's chief medical officer, who cleared her throat. We recognize the bias in yesterday's response," she admitted, voice softening. "It won't happen again." Tasha inhaled, tension easing just enough to hear the admission. "I need more than words," she said. "We need new safeguards. Automatic override for any credentialed emergency responder, mandatory bias training for staff, and a formal apology in every unit." The room grew still, administrators weighing her demands against ingrained bureaucracy. Finally, the chief medical officer nodded. "We'll draft those policies today, and Ms. Monroe," she added quietly, "you'll receive a commendation for your actions." Tasha allowed herself a small nod, recognizing the victory won through confrontation. As she left the room, she knew the real work was just beginning, tearing down the walls of prejudice brick by brick, until no emergency responder would ever again find themselves locked out when lives hung in the balance. The morning after Chief Reynolds' public apology, Captain Brooks convened a station-wide meeting in the engine bay. Firefighters from every shift, veterans and rookies alike, packed in close, helmets in hand. On a whiteboard behind him, Darnell had sketched out 3 demands: formal lockout, review board, anti-retaliation policy, bias, and leadership training. He cleared his throat. Chief Reynolds apologized. That's a start, but if we leave it there, any future captain, especially one who speaks up, can be shut out again. He paused, scanning determined faces. We need structures that protect us all. Lieutenant Mason stepped forward to detail the review board. A three-person committee, two senior captains, and one external civilian appointee that would vet any access changes before badges could be deactivated. Next, Darnell explained the anti-retaliation policy, ensuring any firefighter who reports unfair treatment is granted immediate whistleblower protections. Finally, he called for mandatory bias and leadership training for every officer in chief, sessions led by a community ombudsman to address unconscious bias, cultural competency, and constructive feedback. That afternoon, Darnell met with the city's fire commission. He presented a dossier, station logs, showing his deactivation, the timeline of his unauthorized entry, and public testimonials praising his leadership during the Maple and 6th fire. Commissioners, some visibly uneasy, reviewed the evidence as TV cameras rolled. Darnell spoke clearly. A badge shouldn't be a bargaining chip. We risk lives when politics trumps procedure. 2 days later, the commission unanimously voted to adopt Darnell's proposals. An official order went out. No badge suspension without a review board hearing. All retaliation complaints routed to the city's inspector general, and a series of quarterly bias training workshops for every rank, from cadets to the fire chief. Back at Station 53, the new policies were taped beside the morning briefing roster. Darnell watched as his crew read the headlines. Fire Commission enacts landmark protections for firefighters. Later, Chief Reynolds strode in. No apology this time, just a handshake and a steady gaze. Captain, thank you for turning a crisis into reform. I look forward to joining that training with you. As Darnell clipped fresh training schedules to the bulletin board, he felt a profound shift. The station doors were not only unlocked for him, they were swinging open for every firefighter's voice, safeguarding their duty to serve without fear. And in that moment, Station 53 became more than a place to fight fires. It became a beacon of justice and accountability for the entire department. That afternoon, word of Tasha's confrontation rippled through City Hall. By 4 p.m., she was summoned to the governor's office, a stately chamber lined with portraits of past administrations, its carpet hushed beneath her steps. Seated behind the walnut desk, Governor Wallace looked every bit the dignitary whose daughter she'd saved. Crisply attired, his posture rigid with gratitude and urgency. Ms. Monroe, he began, voice measured but intense. Your actions today have exposed a dangerous gap in our emergency protocols, one that could cost lives beyond my own family. I intend to sign an executive order mandating immediate access for all credentialed first responders, without exception. Tasha met his gaze, feeling the gravity of his words. Governor, that's a vital first step, but it must be backed by training and enforcement. We need mandatory bias awareness programs, clear override procedures at every entry point, and a civilian oversight panel to ensure compliance. The governor nodded briskly, signaling his chief of staff. Prepare the framework. I want your recommendations by tomorrow morning. Turning back to Tasha, he placed a sealed executive memorandum on the desk. Access Policy 117, First Responder Entry Rights. Your name's on this, he said. I'm granting you a seat on the state task force drafting these regulations. As she left the ornate office, Tasha felt the tide turning. In the corridors of power, her voice and her badge would no longer be dismissed. Her fight at the ER doors had become the governor's cry for systemic reform, ensuring that every EMT, paramedic, and firefighter would be met with open arms when lives demanded it most. Tasha Monroe's phone buzzed with messages as she stepped into the State Office of Emergency Services Training Center at dawn, the pale morning lights slanting through floor-to-ceiling windows. Rows of stainless steel gurneys gleamed under fluorescent fixtures, and workstations lined the walls, each equipped with mock door locks and biometric panels. Behind a long conference table sat representatives from every major hospital system: municipal EMS director, security technology vendors, and civil rights advocates. Over 50 faces hungry for change. She cleared her throat. Good morning. Yesterday we secured Policy 117, guaranteed first responder access without exception. Today we enact the measures that will make that policy reality. She clicked the remote in her hand, illuminating the screen behind her with a detailed flowchart. Immediate access override, bias interruption protocol, and accountability dashboard. Each node branched into substeps, timelines, and responsible offices. First, she introduced the immediate access override. Every hospital and emergency entrance must install a standardized override panel, mounted both outside and inside, programmed to register any state-certified responder's credentials, bypassing any local lock. Tasha pulled out a prototype panel, a brushed steel box with a red override button and a fingerprint scanner. Hospital IT directors leaned forward as she demonstrated. In an emergency, she said, jabbing the button, this panel unlocks all doors within 30 seconds, logs the event with timestamp, and notifies security and administration simultaneously. Next came the bias interruption protocol, a mandatory, immersive workshop for every security guard, nurse manager, and administrator, structured around real-world simulations. Volunteers would role-play stressed EMTs, paramedics under fire, or family members in crisis, while trainees navigated their own unconscious biases. Tasha described a scenario. A white security officer hesitates to open the door for a black paramedic carrying a pediatric stretcher, triggering a live-action intervention by an unbiased equity liaison who paused the drill to debrief in real time. We don't just lecture about bias, she emphasized, voice ringing with conviction. We interrupt it the moment it tries to shut us out. Finally, she outlined the accountability dashboard, a public-facing digital portal where every override, every security hold, and every complaint of bias would be logged and reviewed quarterly. Data analysts from the health department would generate compliance reports, hospital by hospital, district by district, and publish them online. Civil rights groups and media outlets could track progress, ensuring transparency. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, Tasha said, watching as department heads exchanged resolute nods. Over the next 6 hours, breakout sessions buzzed with technical planning. Architects sketched retrofit designs for older ER wings. Security vendors scoped network integrations. Legal teams drafted standardized memoranda of understanding. Tasha circulated among the groups, clarifying specifications, merging feedback, and reminding everyone, every locked door we dismantle today is a life saved tomorrow. By late afternoon, the group reconvened to ratify a joint statewide emergency access compact, a binding agreement signed by every participating institution, complete with enforcement measures and annual audits. As she affixed her signature to the final page, Tasha felt the weight of history shift beneath her pen. Weeks later, she returned to Station 42 for a final field test. In the rear bay, EMTs and firefighters stood in turnout gear as Tasha simulated an off-hours emergency. She punched the override button on the mock hospital door down the hall. Metallic locks clicked open, alarms silenced, and digital readouts pinged, compliance success. The crew cheered, and for the first time, Tasha didn't have to beat on locked glass or argue for entry. The path was clear. Driving home that evening, Tasha reflected on the journey, from a locked door at the ER to a state powered by open access, bias interruption, and unwavering accountability. Each installed panel, each trained guard, each logged event was a testament to the relentless stand she refused to let falter. And as the city lights blurred past her ambulance windshield, she knew that no future crisis, no matter how dire, would ever again rise above the steel resolve of first responders sworn to save every life without exception. Nearly a year after the first override panel thudded open for her at the ER entrance, Tasha Monroe found herself standing on the dais of the state capitol rotunda, the ornate chandelier's prisms dancing across the marble floor. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the emergency access dashboard, its graphs tracking 12 months of near-perfect compliance, 0 unauthorized denials, thousands of successful overrides, and hundreds of bias interruption trainings completed. Before her, Rows of legislators, health system CEOs, fire chiefs, and EMTs filled the benches, a cross-section of the very institutions she had challenged and reformed. As the state surgeon general introduced her with measured praise, the boldest advocate our first responder community has ever known, Tasha recalled the moment she first stood before locked doors, heart pounding, forced to choose between protocol and a dying child. She inhaled deeply, stepping forward to the microphone. "This," she began, voice clear over the hush, "is not a victory for me alone. It belongs to every EMT who has ever pounded on doors in vain, every firefighter held back by prejudice, every patient who waited while bias decided their fate." Her gaze swept the audience. Nurses in crisp whites, security directors in suits, medtechs in scrubs, all now united by one simple principle: access without question. She told the story of the 6-year-old girl at the governor's mansion, the one whose airway had collapsed while the ER door remained locked, a story that had sparked Policy 117. But she also spoke of lesser-known rescues: the Hispanic paramedic granted override to save an overdose victim, the rural volunteer EMT, whose credentials once meant nothing behind county line gates, the black belt firefighter whose report of unsafe ladder conditions might have gone ignored. Each anecdote was a hammer blow against complacency, driving home that systemic change meant protecting everyone, every day, in every hospital across the state. After her remarks, the Surgeon General presented Tasha with the State Medal of Public Service, pinning it to her uniform with solemn pride. Standing beside a tearful governor, she accepted a formal state proclamation declaring April 12th Emergency Access Rights Day, a yearly commemoration of the reforms she had championed. Cameras flashed, and applause echoed through the domed chamber, but Tasha's eyes were on the faceless faces behind them. Nurses taking hurried notes, junior EMTs whispering to one another, and elders nodding with a sense of justice fulfilled. That afternoon, she returned to Station 42, where her crew had prepared a surprise celebration in the engine bay. Balloons bobbed above the fire engines, and a banner proclaimed, "Thank you, Captain of Change." As she stepped through the bay doors, unlocked, of course, the entire crew erupted into cheers. Cruz wrapped her helmet with his fist, and Lieutenant Harris clasped her in a bear hug. "You did this," he said, voice thick. "Now, every shift, every call will be different because of you." Later, as the station emptied into the twilight, Tasha wandered down the familiar corridor where she'd once been barred. Above the battery rack, she now found a framed excerpt of Policy 117, the names of every facility across the state that had installed override panels, and a list of every first responder trainer certified under the Bias Interruption Protocol, her name etched at the top. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, remembering the first time she had tried to open a locked door. A small smile curved her lips. That evening, she sat alone in the ambulance bay, the engines silent, reflecting on the journey from locked doors to open halls, from personal indignity to statewide reform. The radio crackled and she answered automatically, then paused. No orders, no crises, just a reprieve. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We did it." Outside, the station's override panels gleamed under the moonlight. Silent sentinels, ensuring that no matter who arrived in uniform, the doors would always open to them, and to every life waiting beyond.